Hello lovely people, this is going to be a great tutorial where I'm going to show you how to create panoramas from shoot process right the way through to the edit process in Lightroom. The edit process is actually fairly easy, but if you don't get the shooting right first, then you're never going to be able to edit them properly. So we're going to take you from shooting to editing and create really cool panoramas. I've come up to the beautiful Mount Tidy in Tenerife to take some brilliant panoramas for you. It's going to be a great tutorial. Let's go. Hello, I'm Mark Newton from the School of Photography, where we teach photography properly because we are professional teachers. And the first thing that I want to talk to you about is the lens to use. Now, you need to use what's called a standard lens, and that means as your eye sees. Now, on a full frame camera, that's a 50mm. If you remember the olden days, you always got a 50mm standard lens. Now, on a crop sensor camera, that is between 30 to 35mm of focal length. Sorry, I should have said that before. When I said 50mm, I mean 50mm focal length. Yeah, and on a crop sensor, it is 30 to 35mm focal length. That changes depending on your camera brand, but pretty much if you leave it around 30mm, then you're going to have a standard lens. So we use that focal length because it doesn't bend the light. As light travels through lenses, light bends. And for instance, if you've got a wide angled lens, you will notice that straight lines bend. So imagine a window frame, for instance, and you're close to it, you're at a wide angle, then the straight lines of the window frame will bend. And that is not good for panorama stitching. So we make sure that we use a standard focal length as your eye sees. 50mm on a full frame, 30 to 35mm on a crop sensor. So now let's talk about settings. So firstly, you're going to need to make sure that your aperture stays the same in every single shot, your ISO stays the same in every single shot, and your focus point stays the same in every single shot. To do that, I normally use aperture priority, and then I'll set my aperture to whatever I think is going to be best. If I want a bit of depth in the shot, I will use a wide aperture. If I want long depth of field, I will use a small aperture. And on a nice bright day like today, I'll put the ISO on to 100. Okay, now let's talk about technique. Now I have got in front of me a beautiful mountain range, Mount Tidy in Tenerife. And what you need to do is take a shot, move your camera and overlap it by about a quarter in each shot. Don't go less than a quarter overlap for each shot. And then when you stitch it together in Lightroom, it makes Lightroom's job a lot easier basically. So I'm going to demonstrate that for you right now. Okay, I'm on aperture priority here. I'm going to take my aperture to f11 like that. My ISO is on 100 there, and I'm going to focus into the distance because obviously it's a mountain and it's all the way over there. So I'm just going to focus into the distance and then switch my lens to manual focus. So you can use a tripod to do this, and you mount the camera onto the tripod and use the panning handle, and you pan the camera like that for each shot. But actually on a nice bright day like this, I'm going to get fast shutter speeds anyway, so I'm going to hand hold. It's going to be easier as well because I've got big rocks going up and down and mountains and stuff like that, so it's going to be easier for me to hand hold, have a nice steady kind of body tripod like this, hand hold, and then take the shots 1, 2, 3, etc. So you can use a tripod, but you can also hand hold and do it like what I just showed you. Lightroom does a really good job at stitching these images together. So let's take the pictures. Okay, here's one. Move the camera, overlap by about a quarter. Take another one, move the camera, overlap by about a quarter. Take the shot, move the camera, take the shot, move the camera, take the shot, and you can keep going for as long as you want really. A good panorama, you can go from 3 to 5 to 7, etc. So now what I'm going to do is have a good walk around this beautiful landscape and take lots of different versions of panorama. I'm even going to try and get some lens flare into some of the panorama shots to really put Lightroom to the test when I get back into the studio. Okay, the next time I'm going to see you is back in the studio. I'll see you soon. Okay, now we're back in the studio and I had a fantastic time up in Mount Teedy photographing the mountain there. It's a beautiful place if you can get there. And now we're going to process the pictures in Lightroom, stitch them together and create some really cool panoramas. Now before we do that, I want to tell you about the courses that we run over at the schoolofphotography.com. Now if you want to learn Lightroom properly in a lovely structured way, then come over and see us. We're professional teachers and we know what we're doing. We've been doing it for years. We also teach you photography. We've got Photoshop stuff and there's loads of freebies over there so that you can try before you buy. So if you want to learn photography properly, taught by professional teachers, come over and see us at the schoolofphotography.com. Okay, now let's jump into Lightroom and make some really cool panoramas. So here we have the pictures in Lightroom ready to process. So I took 8 separate pictures of this mountain so that we could stitch them in to one panoramic image, and here they are. Here's the first one, second one, third one, and as you can see they are overlapped by roughly a quarter. Don't go less than a quarter, remember that from what I said when I was out in the field. Here's another one, and the other one, and the other one, and the other one. Now what we're going to do is stitch all of them together and create one panoramic image, and here's one that I made earlier just to show you, and that's the panoramic version of all of them images. Right, so how do we create it? Well, it's really, really simple. All you do is select all of the pictures that you want to stitch together. So select or in this case I've got the end one, and then I'm going to hold down the shift key and I'm going to select the first one, and as you can see it selects all of them pictures in that range. Then you right click on any of them pictures, you're going to go to photo merge, and then you're going to go to panorama, and then Lightroom is going to do its magic and stitch all of them pictures together, and it brings up this panorama merge preview window. So let's just talk about some of the options that you have in this panorama merge preview window that appears. So at the top here you've got 3 different variations of panorama stitching. The first one you've got is called Spherical, and what that will do is that will map your pictures, all the pictures that you've taken, as if they're inside a sphere. So that works well for really wide panoramas and panoramas that you're doing that have got a bit of height in as well as a bit of length. So if you're going to do a panorama that's got height and length, Spherical is probably a good one to use. The next one down here that we've got is Cylindrical, and that will map the pictures together as if they're inside a cylinder. Now that is perfect for what we're doing now. It'll take a row of images and map them together as if they're in a cylinder. So that's a really good one. The next one down is called Perspective. Now Perspective aligns your images as if they're on a flat surface. Now that can be good to keep straight lines. It can be good for architecture photography. It doesn't work that well for really long panoramas. And in short, what you've got to do is actually play around with these and see which one is going to suit the image that you are working on. So for us and for this picture here, it's going to be between spherical and cylindrical. And I think cylindrical is going to be the best one for this picture. If I click on perspective, it's going to tell me it's unable to merge the pictures because even Lightroom knows that these pictures are not going to suit a perspective map. So we're going to click on cylindrical here like this. And now let's look at the crop options that you've got in this preview window. Now, of course, you can crop it afterwards if you want to when we're in the develop module, but you can also do it here. It's got an option here called auto crop. So if I click on auto crop, it removes all of the white areas. So if you imagine it's mapping and stitching all of these pictures together, and there are going to be some edges, like the white bits around the edge. Auto crop just automatically gets rid of them white edges. Now, like I say, you can do that in the develop module, or you can do it here, auto crop. Now, if I tick off of auto crop, you've also got this thing here called boundary warp. Now, what that does is it takes the white edges and fills it in with what it thinks should be there. And what you do is you take this slider and you slide it. And right at the end, it fills all of the gaps in, and if you go to 0 there, it keeps it as it is as normal. So that can work for you, particularly if you've got a plain edge, if you like. So the sky in this picture, it would work for really well. But I don't think it's going to work that well for the ground because, as you can see, there's lots of bushes and there's lots of texture and stuff going on. So I'm not going to use boundary warp for this picture. I will, however, use auto crop because that's going to do me a favour and save me time afterwards. Now, once you're happy with the settings that you've got in your merge preview window, quite simply click merge down the bottom here. And up the top you can see that Lightroom is merging these pictures together. Now it depends on how fast your computer is, it depends on how many pictures you've got, it depends on the file sizes of each of them pictures to how quickly this processes. And panoramic stitching in Lightroom does take up a lot of power, so don't be surprised if you're sitting there and waiting for a few minutes for this to stitch together. I mean, as you can see, it is still stitching them together even now. So I'll come back to you in a second when this is all stitched together. Okay, now Lightroom has stitched all of these pictures together and it's put it into the film strip along the bottom here. And if you just look at this section here, as I hover over and select actually the panoramic image, it's got the number of the last image, which is 473 there. So that's the last image in the panoramic sequence. And at the end of it, it's got dash pano and .dng. So what Lightroom is doing is it's stitching all of these pictures together, it's creating a brand new raw file for you, adding it to the catalogue, adding it to your Lightroom catalogue, and putting it into the same folder on your hard drive as where all the panoramic pictures are kept, which is really clever, really handy. And if you don't know that much about catalogues and folders, collections and stuff like that, then you really need to step back a bit in your Lightroom learning and learn about that because it's really important. And of course we cover all of that on our course, but it is really important just so that you know. So here we have our panoramic image and now we are going to develop it. But before we do, let's zoom in on this picture and just see how good Lightroom has stitched these individual images together to make one picture. So down here, you can see that there is a stitch between the mountain. So let's zoom in on this mountain Now we're at 100% of the picture here, and you cannot see any stitching at all. You cannot see any evidence that two pictures have been stitched together, and that is absolutely fantastic, considering that this is a well textured image with lots of different tones and colors and textures. You can't really argue with how good Lightroom, how good a job Lightroom has done here. So I'm going to click on the picture again and zoom back out, and we are going to develop it. So let's go over to our basic palette first, and let's have a little play around with this. Firstly, I'm going to probably bring down the highlights a little bit, and then bring up the shadows. It's this area here that I want to bring up. So I'm going to bring up the shadows here like that, which is really cool. Maybe not that much. I'm going to add some blacks into the scene to give it a little bit of contrast. And I'm going to put up the vibrance slightly, put up the saturation slightly, just to boost that color. Okay, next I'm going to come down to the tone curve. And I'm going to put in a slight S-curve, because I love doing an S-curve. I pretty much put an S-curve on nearly all of my pictures because it makes a hell of a difference in contrast. So if I toggle on and off, you can see the difference there. It's very slight, but it's them very slight differences that's going to make your shot look professional to an amateur. Okay, so all them slight differences all add up to becoming a professional looking shot. So make sure that you do that. Then we're going to come down to detail here. We're going to come down to the detail palette. Let's click on that, and we're going to sharpen up the picture a little bit. I'm going to type in 80 into the amount. I'm going to type in 1.2 into the radius like that. And then I'm going to zoom in on an area and see if it's made a difference on the sharpness. So let's toggle on and off. That's without the sharpness, and that's with the sharpness added. And as you can see, it's done a really good job there. There's a little bit of noise in the sky caused by the sharpening, and what we can do for that is use masking. So if I hold down the Alt key, click on the masking slider and pull it back, then what's actually happening here is the sharpening effect is sticking to the edges only, and the smooth areas like the sky, the sharpening effect is not affecting. So I will leave it about there. Yeah, and as you can see there, the noise in the sky has been removed and the sharpness in the rocks has been kept, and that's exactly what you want. Again, if you want to know a bit more about sharpening and masking, you've got to learn Lightroom properly, I'm afraid. This is just like a whistle-stop tour. So I'm going to toggle on and off again. Yep, that's nice and sharp, lovely. Now let's come down to lens correction here, and I always add chromatic aberration. Sometimes it needs it, sometimes it doesn't. But again, Lightroom does a fantastic job of removing chromatic aberration, and we don't seem to have much of it here anyway, so I can't really show you that effect properly. But chromatic aberration is where you get coloured lines around the edges of, well, particularly rocks, buildings and stuff like that. Let's zoom out of this picture and look at it so far. Okay, I'm going to click on the before and after view down the bottom here. So you can see already it's making quite a difference in the two shots. So let's go back to full view again. And I think it's a little bit imbalanced with lightness and darkness. On the left-hand side, it's a little bit darker in the sky than it is the right-hand side. So what I'm going to do is add a graduated filter, which is this one at the top here. Click on graduated filter. I'm going to drag it across this side and move it around. Oh, not that much. And maybe just, I don't want it to be too dramatic. I just want it to be something like that. I'm going to drag my exposure down, sorry, up a bit, so it's just a little bit overexposed. And that's not bad. If I toggle on and off and see the difference, that balances it out a little bit better. Actually, I'm going to come down just slightly more maybe only half a stop. Now that I like. So I'm going to click done down the bottom. Now that's balanced it out a bit more. I think it might also need a bit more boost in colour. So let's bring up the vibrance and see what happens there. Yeah, that's not bad. And probably bring up the saturation slightly. And again, that's not bad neither. And let's just try one more thing by changing the calibration of the camera. So I'm going to come down to the bottom, come down to camera calibration, and click on this Adobe Standard and click on camera landscape. I just want to see if it makes a difference or not. And it does make a difference, but it's sort of over saturating it just slightly, which means I'm going to come back up to saturation and bring that saturation down again, and possibly the vibrance down again. And I'm thinking that these shadows might need lifting a little bit more, so let's pull that up a bit more. That's not bad at all. Now, as you can see with Lightroom, you can keep going and keep going, but this is not bad. I am going to now toggle on the before and after so that you can see it. So that's the before, the original stitch shot, and that's the after, the developed shot. If I zoom in and go to maybe a 1/8 view like that, that's better. And now you can see the difference quite clearly between the two shots. Yeah, I'm really happy with that. That weren't bad, a nice quick develop, and you can see how quickly you can stitch panoramas together and develop them in Lightroom if you've got the shots right first. Just like I said before, get the shots right first. This part becomes really, really easy. Okay, so let's just zoom out on this by clicking the loop view here and then just clicking directly on the picture, and it goes to full screen again. And I want to show you another panoramic that I took while I was up there, where I purposely got lens flare because I wanted to see how good Lightroom would be to stitch together a panoramic that had lens flare. So let's have a look at that. Oh, and I want to show you another tip here. At the beginning and end of each panorama or series of panoramic pictures, it's a really good idea to just take a picture of your hand, your feet, the floor, or something that's totally different, and it sort of ends, let's look at these two ends, it ends the panoramic sequence that you are taking. Okay, so here are the other pictures that I took. I'll quickly flick through them. That one, I'm just going to very quickly go through them so that you can see them. Now, it's these three at the end that I want you to pay attention to, because they've all got lens flare. So that one, and that one. They've all got lens flare, and I really wanted to see what Lightroom would do stitching all of these pictures together. So a nice panoramic was my idea, with lens flare from the sun or the sunset coming in from the corner, and it created this shot here, which is really cool. Now look at that lens flare. Let's zoom in again. Again, I'm going to go to 1/8. So you can see how it's managed to stitch this lens flare together in such a brilliant way that it's really hard to believe that the Lightroom is that clever that it can detect lens flare and stick it together. Well, it's actually what it's doing is detecting the pixels and sticking them together. So it doesn't know it's lens flare, but I'm just amazed by how good Lightroom is at panoramic stitching. I honestly believe that there isn't another program out there that can do it as good as Lightroom can do it. And I just got lucky here because I got this guy, don't know who he is, he was just walking around, having a look around, standing right on the top of this kind of ridge of rocks, and it just puts really cool perspective into the shot. So there you go, this is a really, really good panorama that shows just how good Lightroom is at stitching pictures together. Let's just click on this and zoom out so you can see it in all of its glory. Okay, I can't stress to you enough how important it is to get your pictures right first before you bring them into Lightroom to stitch them together. And that was the whole process from taking the shot to stitching them together and creating and developing in Lightroom really, really cool panorama pictures. Now, If you've liked this video, please like it and share it with your friends. It really, really helps us out. If you're going to give this a go and you want us to see it, hashtag the School of Photography if you're on Instagram and on Facebook, and we can see it and comment on it if we can, and sometimes we even feature your work on our Instagram feed, so we give you a little shout out. So don't forget to hashtag the School of Photography. Put a comment below. We love reading what you think of our stuff. So if you've liked it, again, put a comment below so we can read it. We love doing that. If you want to learn photography, don't forget to come over to theschoolofphotography.com, where we teach you photography and Lightroom really, really well. We've been doing it for years. We know what we're doing. You're going to learn it in a really structured way and come away really competent Lightroom users. Okay, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. This has been a brilliant tutorial. I've loved doing it. And learn more at the School of Photography.